This meeting to order. It is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019. This is the Radnor Township Historic and Architectural Review Board. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, so if everybody would please stand. Our second order of business is the reorganization. We did not meet for a few months this winter, and we postponed it last month because we were missing a couple of our members up here. So we need to elect the chairperson and the vice chairperson. Should we start with the vice chairperson? Do I have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Bob.
Do I have a second? Terry
I'll second it.
seconds. Sarah's not. All those in favor of Bob as vice president? Okay, four.
Thank you.
You're in favor as well. All right, and chairperson. Do we have a nomination for chairperson?
I nominate you, Janelle.
Yes.
Second.
Seconded. All right, all those in favor of myself being chairperson? We got four of us. All right, thank you guys for that. All right, so our first order tonight on the agenda is HARB 2019-02. This is 310 Oak Lane, and a new two-car garage. Because we have four different applications that we're looking at tonight, I just want to review very quickly. We are concerned with what you can see from the public right-of-way. So if a piece of it is not going to be seen, we don't need to know about it. The interiors we're not concerned about. So when you come up, just let us know what we're going to see and how that is going to continue with the spirit of the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, one of those? Okay, good. Well, I can use this, it's fine. I think so. I'm old school. I use Monica Robertson. This house actually.
Could you please use the microphone for us?
Is it on? Okay, can you hear? Okay. This house came up for, well, it's not in focus. Okay. This house had an addition put on it 5 years ago?
6.
6 years ago now. And they needed a garage. And it took a while to get that variance. And this is the elevation here, where the garage is most visible. The garage will be behind the house. But beside the house. So it's visible from a little bit from Oak Lane and then also visible from the side street. Beech Tree.
East.
So my intention, I have seen several of these old houses. Several of them have garages that were clearly built. I don't know if you can see that or not. They're just boxes, and they were clearly built in the 50s, 60s, whatever, when cars became popular. And the original carriage houses are gone. I did have the pleasure of seeing a house on Walnut Avenue, 225, that had a carriage house, original carriage house in the back, that actually had horses and carriages. And it was like a little mini-me of the house. And I thought to myself, that would be really neat to reproduce that if I ever get a chance. Well, I got the chance. So this, it's not in focus. I did a freehand perspective of what the garage is going to look like from the corner of Beech Tree and Oak Lane. So this is what it will actually look like in 3 dimension. I just did this freehand. It's not very, but it explains where the garage is going, towards the rear and towards the side, off of an existing macadam driveway. So I copied as many of the roof lines as I could that the original architect would have done. We have windows. We're copying some of the windows. Let me show the elevation of. I need the white paper. See, the garage doors are going to be carriage house doors, typical for this era. The roof is a gambrel roof, and there's a reverse gable cut into it. The windows for more storage. All the soffits have the rafter tails exposed to mimic the house. Windows, we're choosing. This is the side elevation that faces Beech Tree. We're using windows. These are repeated in the house. You find this exact window in the house. And this window facing the other side, the yard, is this elevation. And this is the rear elevation facing the stream. So the rear neighbor would see this elevation. It's just garage storage and storage above with a pull-down ladder. That's it. The siding will be clapboard, cedar clapboard to match the house. It will either be cedar or hardy board. And then we're using shake siding to match the house. Several of the gables in the house have shake siding. And I think we're going to do that out of real cedar, aren't we?
Yes.
Yes. We use a stain sealer, which is better at preserving cedar than paint. Stain sealers are very effective for that. The shingles will be the same we used on the house, which replicate as close as we can the real slate of the roof. We used those on the addition 6 years ago, and they were fine, and they're still available. So we're going to use those for this roof. The trim around the windows replicates the house exactly, and then because the area, of course, every area in Wayne is prone to flooding, so I have built a stone. We've built up the foundation wall so that the sill plate is 18 inches above grade or higher. And there's a stone wrapping around it, which it'll be stone facing 2 inches to copy the house stone.
Yeah, that matches the house.
You're right. And that'll be all sides. So, and then there are architectural details like brackets to support a little overhang, roof overhang at the doors. That's what we have at the rear of the house. There's a little scoop where the siding meets the stone, the transition between the two on the house, and I've replicated that here. So the colors will match the house. Windows will be simulated divided light. I'm not sure what company we're going to shop for the best value, but the color will match the house again. So it'll be same type. It'll look like the same type of window.
I would like to make a motion that the HARB offer the commissioners a recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness.
I'll second that.
All those in favor to recommend appropriateness? We have 4 yeses, so the certificate will be offered. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fran.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, do you mind leaving on the podium? Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. The second order of business is or the second application, I apologize, is Harb 2019-3. This is 215 Windermere Avenue. Looks like infilling a porch, garage doors, new entrance door, not visible, and then a new rail and steps at the street level. So if you could also please focus on what we can see from the public right away.
Good evening. My name is Scott Obar with John Milner Architects. It's a pleasure to be for you again. The application is 215 Windermere. You can see the site plan here. We'll next look at the four elevations, photographs 1 through 4, which can be seen from the public right-of-way. In elevations and photographs 1 through 4, you can see what can be seen from the public right-of-way. We are doing work on the east elevation, which are some of the photographs below, but they cannot be seen from the public right-of-way. Thought we would give you those just as a courtesy. The main change that can be seen from the public right-of-way will involve this photograph right here. With the addition of a driveway down the east elevation, the upper photograph, upper right, is the current condition. There are existing steps down to the existing drive. The photograph to the right is what we propose, as we will be lowering the grade with civil engineering to provide the drive down the east side. You can see we're replicating the existing railings and infilling the stone steps with stone to match the adjacent. This is really the only portion of the project that can be seen from the public right-of-way. I'm happy to take any questions. There are two elevations of the east side where you can see the change as well. Existing and proposed.
What's going to happen to the stairs on the front porch? They're going away when the excavation takes place. Are they going to be moved to a different area or just removed altogether?
That is the east elevation. Those side steps will be removed altogether. We'll probably save the stone for the stone steps for the owner if they want to reuse it elsewhere. There are steps on the front elevation to provide access to the porch that will remain.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend a certificate of appropriateness.
I second.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. All are in favor, so we are going to recommend the certificate of appropriateness for this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Harb 2019-04 is 401 North Wayne Avenue. This looks like a 2-story addition.
There's no fighting me anymore. Good afternoon. I'm Cam Lacey from DCL Architects. I'm here to represent the Bakers in this edition. They may or may not be here tonight, but I've been told I can do this. I'm allowed to do it. Sorry. That's a clarification. All right. This is it's like an 1880 to 1890 house. That's a Queen Anne style. There's about maybe 4 or 5 of these on North Wayne Avenue that have pretty much the original porch and layout. This one's been changed a little bit over time on the front, but I'll go through. If you've looked at the photographs, you'll notice that the front porch there was an addition put on that is not exactly in character with the rest of the neighboring ones, but it's been done and it's there. This is a unique property for these types of lots, in that this is a corner property, so you do see quite a bit of this addition. This light gray is the existing house, and this is all 2-story, and then this little section here, let me get my big finger out of the way. This little section here is a 1-story shed roof that points that way. And our intention is to take this and make this into 2-story and have a darker section here. That's a 2-story piece. And then there's a 1-story underneath that has a porch facing the rear. So the scale of this is all in scale with the rest of the property. Oops. Here's another one of those exact same houses.
I would just like to make a comment
Yes.
on this property. When I did some research on this house, as far as when it was built, it kind of varies. So the Radnor Historical Society says 1884. Township records say 1880 to 1890. Property records for Delaware County say 1880. But also, according to Radnor Historical Society records there, this was a small cottage that obviously what you're sharing today, it's been altered. But at least as far as their records explain it, this is a small cottage that was at least built, at least at its earliest date in 1880, just to give some perspective here.
That's right, and you'll notice this one is pretty much original equipment. The one next door was done over maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but kept most of the main cross gabling and porch that the originals had. This elevation, you can't see anything. No one's going to see that. As you come down Beach, you're going to be able to see this rear elevation and this side elevation.
It is very exposed.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of go through. This is the existing, since the pictures don't really show it very well. The existing, this is the Beech Tree elevation, which is the south elevation, and this is that addition that was put on a little while ago. This is the 2-story section in the rear, and on the other side, if you flip it around, that's that little shed section, which is that little infill. So we're going to infill that and then add another piece here. And on the rear elevation, that's the little shed piece that we would be filling in. This is normally a open porch slash, kind of a utility space, but the sheds usually go in the other direction. So this was redone at some point as well. And then there's another drawing that shows some demolition on what things are changing that you guys have. And into the elevations. All right. That main south elevation is this one. And you can see we're adding this piece, but we're stepping it down. I want to maintain that this main roof line it maintains the highest peak, and that we go down, but we use elements that are within the roof line again. And then this is this porch that, so basically they're expanding a kitchen area and they're adding a bedroom. So that's kind of, you know, and then you get an outside porch here that steps down to the lawn. From the rear, it's the same sloping and same bracketing detail with the lookouts. It's a stucco building right now. We'd love to introduce, a lot of these have shake and siding and mix of things. I don't think they're going to have a budget to do the whole house over or do the second floor level over, so we're going to, right now it's planned to just match what's there, which is a stucco finish. Some standing seam metal on this roof line, which matches the front that's been redone. And then from the other side, the north side, which you can't see, this is that infill that's over the shed, and then the other side of, which is mimicked here. So you're maintaining this main roof cap by just taking that slope and pushing it out, and then stepping down and doing this gable. And so that, what I'm trying to do is maintain the original scale of this thing. And you know, this is an addition, and it is a smaller scale, and that's kind of the idea behind it. But you know, reusing all the different elements that, you know, exposed rafter tails and you know, things that are native to the house as it was originally.
So the beveled clad columns throw me a little bit.
Well, there are no columns on this, and this is some of the houses have flat stock, you know, 6x6 or 3x4s or something like that. They wanted to dress this a little bit more. You know, this is considered a Queen Anne style, and you have low style, high style, middle style, whatever. So we're trying to just, you know, push that a little bit on there. But these are all sort of, you know, on the wish list for them. The rest of it's all in keeping with, you know, what's there. There's just nothing that. If for instance, if this porch was original and had the columns that were original, we would be matching those. You know what I mean? So it's since we don't have that, we're just taking it. It's a square column, so we're not doing round columns. So we're maintaining that, but we're adding some detail to it. You know, AZAC. It's the standard AZAC materials for trims and mahogany on the porch floor. And you know, it's pretty standard what we normally do with these restorations.
I have just a couple observations and opinions. This house, where it's situated there on Peachtree Lane, it's right there, entirely visible from the street, very exposed. Also, too, Ken, what you have been presenting now, I understand how this house was altered over time, because at least in my opinion, I'm convinced it was a working person's cottage when it was built, and then over time became a Queen Anne style, and now we have this addition. So just as far when I think of, like, for example, what is a cottage, it's a small house. But this cottage in its day has been considerably altered. But now we have an addition that's entirely visible on Peachtree Lane in the public view, and this is a relatively substantive addition, in my opinion.
So one comment I have on that is that and I could be wrong, but I do recall that a lot of the original homes in Wayne were called cottages when they were first being sold, which I could be wrong there.
No, that's true. There's one that's called small cottage. This is probably one of those. There are other ones as well.
Yeah, so I don't know that it meant cottage as in small little house. I think it was how they were, I don't think they were ever that small, but it was, yeah, marketing.
I was just using the definition of cottage from the dictionary.
Yeah. Well, you know, and that's what they were. They were. These are the smaller houses in the North Wayne development.
Right.
I do want to give.
They were also put on, you know, North Wayne Avenue, so those were smaller lots. And smaller houses.
Right.
The larger ones were inland, had larger lots.
I do want to give full disclosure that in 1991, my husband and I almost bought that house.
We did too.
So you almost bought it also? Maybe I was in
But
a
I- but
bidding war
I
against you.
walked in and I felt tired when I was there, just looking at it, because it needed a lot of
It
work.
needed so much interior work, yes.
So
Well,
we went to another one.
so did we.
And then that, I don't remember if that addition was on at that point or not, I forget. I think it was.
I think the shed addition on the back was there.
Yeah.
And the
I
porch
think
was
that
definitely
that
there.
was yeah.
The porch was definitely there, so that's been non-conforming since before the historical district was designated. So that gets a pass. But I think that addition is not, as much as you understand what we're looking for design-wise, I think the scale of it is not in keeping with the scale of the house. You're putting a big addition on the back. It's not like you're redoing the porch or putting a roof on the porch or something that's going to just enhance what's there. You're making a completely different house out of it. And it's very, very exposed.
It is exposed. It's definitely trying to sit down and be a smaller piece of the house. So, with the step-ins and the step-downs.
Well, that's from the front. You won't be able to see it from the front, but the main view of this house is from the side.
And that's where you see it.
And it will be extremely obvious.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You're seeing those step-downs and those
Yeah,
step-ins.
I understand,
from
but
that side.
that's not going to be immediately obvious from somebody just driving past.
The other, some of the other houses have larger additions than these. Not that that's a good thing, but it has been done. And they've used roof lines that aren't appropriate and so forth. We're trying to do something that's not even as big as those things and make it more appropriate.
To be appreciated, because I've observed that too, like with former Harbs and what they approved apparently. Some of those additions are very, very large. But now, we being like a new Harb in that way, kind of like looking at the whole issue of scale. Because I know, in my opinion, if I was sitting on former Harbs that approved some of those additions that were attached to houses, I would have, in my own individual vote, have voted no.
Well, all these, the ones I mentioned were all pre-Harb, all those additions. Yeah, so I mean, it was obvious that they were just doing whatever they wanted to and getting, space, easy, getting the easy way. And that's not something that we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that they got the space, but it was a more diminutive piece to the main house. The main house still has a big presence, and that's what we wanted to maintain. And then the rest of it, the porch is kind of, it's a negative space. It's a see-through. It's not a hard wall, and the rest of it is kind of, light.
And that's a question I have for you. And I think that you are working to make this look a bit smaller in scale. I can see that you're trying
We're
to do
trying
this.
hard.
And I know that
Yeah.
your clients probably want as much space as they can get for as little money as they can get it for. My question, though, is specifically around that porch. Is that a common element in a Queen Anne-style house to have like an open porch with a
They would have a
building
smaller
on
one.
top of it?
They would have a smaller one on the rear sometimes, but they were usually utilities. All of these houses, we think about it when people were building these houses, the back end kitchen and all that. It was all a utility. There was nothing about open living, and so it was as small as it could possibly be, and it was there solely to serve as a service. And today's lifestyle is not that way. So my conundrum is that while I'm super sensitive to all these existing things, and if it was me, I'd want to preserve all these houses in their state, and bring them back to the way they were, but that's not reality for, property rights and things with, people who the Harb is allowing them to do additions and do things that are in keeping with the spirit. And so my problem is to try to do that and satisfy a client who needs more space desperately, and yet somehow bend it into a form that respects what's there and respects the footprint and respects the whole idea of a small, as you say, cottage. So to me, this was not an offensive, large addition to this house. It's kind of the next step, and it's the last step. They can't do anything else to it. So these were the tools that we were trying to do, which was to lower and set in. I mean, while this wall is in line, this wall sets in, and this wall sets in. So everything is smaller and compacted as you go back. So that was the concept to get it into the smaller scale.
It is below the roof line, the original roof line. That's a positive.
I think the fact that it's below the roof line is not going to be visually apparent because it goes back so far. When you're driving past on Beech Tree, it's still going to look like a big addition, no matter how much lower the original roof line, no matter how far setback it is. The three-dimensionality of it is not going to be immediately apparent to the casual passerby, and that's our concern, is what does it look like from the person who's driving by?
Well, so
And the scale of it is really what troubles me, not the design.
I agree with you about the scale. However, I appreciate the layered approach, which is common to the Queen Anne style. So the fact that it is at least a nod towards it is something I appreciate. And I don't want to harp on the little stuff, but I have a hard time getting past some of the minor details or embellishments. Perhaps would be a better way of putting it. That include the clad columns, the rear windows. If they're windows or doors, it's tough to tell. Are they sliding doors? Are they?
They're large French doors.
The French doors?
Yeah.
Okay. I have no problem with any of the materials that you've chosen. It's out of our purview anyway, but
One of the guiding factors I've had on additions to existing historic structures is that shouldn't be more than 4. A lot of people in a lot of different districts, it's a third. You're allowed to add a third, but I always try to keep it to a quarter and no more. And that's, we've done better than that, I think. In terms
Are you talking about the square footage of the living area?
No, the perceived addition, which is this face.
Compared to what? The total square
You got
footage of the house?
No, if you look at this as we were looking at it now, as a flat drawing, that is a quarter of the whole thing, from here to here. That's 1/4, half, 3/4, 1. So that's sort of a guiding principle that I've gone through. It's not written down anywhere for the harb here. There are other harbs that have some sort of square foot calculation with percentages and whatnot, and
Which is not always a good criteria, by the way.
it's not.
Because it doesn't address the question of fit.
No, but it's something to say, okay, well, it doesn't or does do that. Now what? Now you look at the other things that are in the ordinance. But just from a personal standpoint in developing things like this, that's sort of in the back of my head. It really can't be bigger than that. That's the biggest thing you want to be able to do. And in that case, the main house is always going to remain the biggest piece of the original property, of the original structure, and the smaller piece is just that. It's the smaller piece. So I think the scale between the two is as important as the scale of the whole thing. But we always looked at, the material scales, which, we used to get arguments all the time from staff here about, the size of siding. I call that's a scale of the building. Like if you have 4-inch siding, it's a whole lot different than 8-inch siding. It's everything's scale. And so when you go from the micro to the macro to the, to this, it's the same idea. You look in footprint, if you look in footprint here, that piece is not large compared to this. It's still, if you looked at square feet, it's probably less than a quarter. But I'm looking at perception, because square feet really doesn't matter as much when you're walking down the street. So if that is 1/4 of this whole thing, to me, that's the max. That's where you go. Where's that line? Where is it acceptable? Is it here? Is it there?
Cam,
What's the criteria
that
for that?
footprint that you showed us includes all of the porch, does it not? I think that's a little disingenuous because
No, I'm
the
talking
house
about to
starts. Oh, it did start from there? It seems so much bigger in this
This is how
elevation
big
than
it
what the
is.
footprint.
But I'm looking at, this is sort of low and down and not original. So I'm looking at the main house. And in relation to this whole mass, that's trying to be 1/4 of that. And that's what we've come up with. So that's just the guideline that I use, and I think it's pretty effective. And it gives people what they need to do in their, realizing what they need to do in their houses.
I'm sorry, I do not buy the argument that people must put on an addition. They could just buy a bigger house, so let's not go there with that one. I'm going to abstain on this one because I know this property very well, and I don't feel that I can be objective.
Just as a comment, we really don't we can't do anything about anything that might be perceived as massing in a way, like with additions. And I still think we're grappling with that. But I think
I understand that's part of the
in-
ordinance. Massing on everything is in the ordinance. You respond to that. In the site plan first, you look at this, you're supposed to get a site plan and look at how much bigger the piece is to make the whole thing. Like, what is that ratio? And there's not a number, but you look at it and you feel, what's the open space versus, is that appropriate? Is the scale of that? So that's massing. Then this is
But
massing.
again, as compared to
in
what?
elevation.
Using the square footage of the entire space or the square footage of the original house? Which ratio do you use?
You start with what is here now, and it is what it is, and then you're adding in footprint something that is appropriate to that whole footprint in scale and in mass. And then you flip it around and you look at three-dimensionally, and then you try to say, well, we're not going higher, we're going lower, it's necking in, it's trying to be small as it can be, and it's using all the elements of the original. So, if the columns are too dressy for this, we'll go to square, 6x6s or whatever. We'll go and look at some of the additions or the porches that are around and just say that's what we're going to use.
Yeah, and I don't want to belabor it, but I would certainly appreciate that. Because I think
That's
I think the
fine.
details come forward. And
Yeah.
it could be that they did have bevels, but I can't recall ever seeing, beveled,
Some of them have turn columns.
Yeah, I was going to say, some,
So they're all
there
over
are
the
some
place.
nice details,
They're all over
especially in the
place.
Queen's Anne style.
Yeah, but some of these houses on this
Yeah.
street have turn columns.
Right, and, and I would say that the question there is it mimicking what happens to be found in the street, or is it trying to resurrect a design element from the original intent and time period?
I think it's building. Like, you have to look at these houses. They were built in 18 whatever. And they started out as X. And then somebody didn't do anything to them until the 30s or 40s or whatever, and they did something really minor. But that's a piece of its history. you add that, it's an additive history to the house. And so when you get something that is 150 years old or whatever it is, there are changes to the original. And since this is not going in the Smithsonian, we're not bringing it back to the original. We're trying to say, well, here's the history of it. We're going to try to take it to its next piece of history, but be, sensitive to all the things that matter. And so that's kind of where I look at things, is that, you're continually layering to the history of a property.
As a counterpoint to that, I guess my feeling is if there were elements that had been added along the way that include having the beveled columns, I would say, okay, you're simply replicating what's been added to the history. But since it hasn't been added to the history and you're adding an additional element to it, my feeling is that it really should be in keeping with the original design in town.
Well, that's pretty minor, right?
Yeah.
I have no problem doing that at all. It's cheaper to do that, and it goes with it brings some of the original back. So that's a good thing.
So Cam, I'm going to ask you something. I don't know if we have the ability to do this, but from a scaling perspective, I'm looking at P2, which I think is the best photograph we have of the side as it currently stands. And I'm wondering if we can sort of indicate on that for us just an idea of how much mass we are adding. And if there's a better photo or vantage point.
It's not going to show it, I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, one of the problems is that it's really hard to see, but that elevation is this elevation before. And so it's masked a lot right now. This one, if I had gone right here and taken a shot, that tree would have knocked out the whole side, so you would never have seen that piece. So this addition is sort of right there. If you look at the perspective of it, it's about right there. So, and since it steps back and does some things, I don't think it's going to be really readily, seen. Like, nothing is ever like this. You never see that view as a flat view. It's always from an angle. It always has, some kind of cover. This one is, this one I was saying was pretty much original. This one was redone. You can see the scale of what's going on back there. And that's not what we want to do.
I'd like to make one comment. And I'll ask my fellow board members, if a Supreme Court justice were to step down from the Supreme Court just because he wanted to go back into the regular practice of law, wouldn't you think he'd have a better chance because he had been on the Supreme Court and knew the law inside and out? We have had tonight, we've had two unusual things. One is a representative from John Milner. John Milner is probably the best known living restoration architect. He's sought after everywhere. He's made his reputation throughout the region in restoration. When I joined the board, Harb, and this may be my last year, I've lost count. Cam was chairman. He's so well aware, and he's also an architect, which gives him the advantage that we don't have of being on site with regard to the spatial relationships and being very, very familiar with what we're dealing with as Harb members. On that alone, I'm going to have to say I would be in favor of accepting this plan because I think you know what you're doing. And you know what what we're looking for, and I think that you've worked to make this the best possible plan.
Well, thanks for that. You're responding to a client's needs. And, if they didn't need a second floor on it, I don't think we'd be having any issues here at all. Because having something that comes out that far with a shed or something is, that's the same footprint when you look at that on the site plan. It's the same exact footprint as an addition. So you look at that and you say, well, is that compatible with the site? Does that work with the site? Is it too big? Does it crowd anything? No. Okay, well then, these guys need to have more space. And so they're trying to get a second floor. So, okay, we've got to compact it. And so that's what we came up with. And so given my charge from this client, this is what I felt was the solution to do that and still respond to the ordinance as I understand it, and the neighborhood and all the things that make up these types of houses. I'd like to see an addition that's done to these houses that doesn't overpower the house and doesn't go out of scale, and have that as an example, as opposed to the other ones that were done before. And even this front piece, which is not in keeping, it's huge in utility for them. They have a great amount of space that they didn't have otherwise, but I don't think that would have been passed here today. So I think this is an answer to their needs and trying to stay in the guidelines of the ordinance and doing the best you can. It's a stretch. It's stretching it a little bit because it is a bigger piece than I think you're comfortable with, obviously. But I think given all the things we're doing to make it actually look, it's not just taking walls straight back and going up. We're trying to do things and sculpt it to make it look smaller and to be the lesser in the hierarchical, heights and roof lines. So, those are the things that led me to this. And whatever else we can do to bring back some originals, like the column issue, that's a no-brainer. We'd do that. I'll do that.
I honestly think what's throwing me off a little bit is probably the non-conforming porch. I don't know if non-conforming is the right word, but the other porch, because I feel as though that's trying to tell me what the style of the house is.
No,
and I know that that's not. So I'm looking for some symmetry or balance or something, and I think that's what's kind of holding me back a little bit, or holding my eye back.
If you cover that up, that's, we're not responding to that in any way. That is what it is. And so we're just trying to do something that works towards the rear.
We have to watch our ancient call to symmetry, because what has made Wayne famous is its asymmetry.
I'd be curious, would the house owners entertain perhaps a smaller addition?
The question then becomes, what is that? Does that go to there? Is that enough? To there? How do you quantify that? To me, this is.
I wish I could, but you know what? I can't.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. So if I look at the existing elevation and it has cross cabling and all kinds of interesting things going on, and it's cut right there. So to me, you've got all these things that step down and do things towards the front, but it's chopped off right here, 2.5 stories, boom, you're looking straight up. This breaks all that up on the rear. To me, that's my feeling, is that it does the things that the client wants, and it softens that line on the original house and brings it down to grade level, because you are coming from main roof, which is lower, second floor walls, then you have a skirt shed roof that wraps around, which softens that. It sits in that. The second floor sits in that. And then the first floor is not a full, it's not a full build-out. It's got some air in there. And then you step down, it's a wraparound steps that go down to grade. So the whole thing is trying to just sit and go into grade and be smaller.
I do appreciate that argument because, the way that you presented it in that way, it looks like something's missing on that side, considering how the house has been altered over time. It's almost kind of like a situation when I look at a typical flat roof of a house, and I always think there's something missing. So I do appreciate that illustration.
Well, that's why we thought that was probably an appropriate thing to do, and I don't like to see, to me, it's kind of like, well, what was here? In a way, you could say, well, wasn't there something here? But there wasn't, but it needed something, even if it was just a shed or whatever. Same thing on this side, it's the same idea, you're just set back a little bit. From the rear, you can't really tell because it's just a flat elevation. But when you're there, it definitely looks like it wanted to be a little bit longer. I can certainly look at this space and see if it can be, pulled this way a little bit more. But again, I don't know what that magic, what that magic number is for you guys.
So, first, I want to address something that was said before, and this is not about the design. And Cam, you have provided incredible service in your public duties as well as your private professional duties. But we're not here to be a rubber stamp to somebody who's sat in our chairs before. I think it is our responsibility to the community, just as it was for you, to be able to have these kinds of discussions and determine whether or not we think that the Board of Commissioners should move forward with this or not. Now, all of that said, I don't have an issue with the scale. I don't have an issue with really the major design elements. I've said my piece, and I won't go through it again regarding some of the details. So with that, I would like to make a motion for a recommendation for a certificate of appropriateness.
Second.
You second? All right, it's been seconded. All those in favor? I think 4 are in favor and 1 is abstaining. So we will
Thank you.
grant you the
I hope I made some
certificate.
sense. It's just, every board's different. Everybody responds differently to what they're thrown at, what's thrown at them. And, I don't expect to come up here and say, hey, how you doing? Let's go. That's not, I don't like being, I was telling Janelle, I don't like being here. I like being up there more. Oh, yeah. So, so anyhow, it's my job to be, I have to actually be more persuasive to you guys standing here than I do out there or up, I have to do that. And if I don't do that, it's not a failing, it's just that you guys don't see what I see or whatever, and that happens. But I'm thankful that, you listened and, it was something that you're okay with.
I'd say we can definitely tell, we can see the design, we can tell that you're trying. It's just any of these houses that put on additions, we really need to consider what we're approving and make sure. But, if the public wants to help us make decisions, there is no one standing behind
No.
you, so no one is opposing it.
Mary Ann's not up for it.
And so, all
Well,
right.
I tell you what we'll do, though, in response to everything I've heard here, is we will go to a square column or something that's, coming from one of the area houses that's already there that looks like it's an original piece. I wouldn't want to go to a turn column on this house, and they're out there in these other examples, but I would go to a square. And I will try to make this addition smaller in length going back. I'll try to do whatever we can to get that, to skinny it up. We're not into construction documents yet. This is why we stop here and say, hey, let's look at this. You know, right now it works inside, but it could work a little smaller. I'll see. So I'll definitely look into that. So the idea, the concept will be the same, but it would be responding to what you guys were saying about the size of it and also some of the details. So we'll definitely address that. And if you want to follow up, you know, I'll come in and show you what we did, or you can go see, or call me in, or do whatever you want me to do. So you want me to do the other one?
Yes, so I will announce. Now we're moving on to HARB 2019-05. This is 421 St. David's Road. Reconstruct second floor of existing residence, rear family room addition, front porch addition with bedroom above.
Backwards. This one is a totally different animal. This is in South Wayne. And this is kind of a colonial revival type of thing. I
I'd like
don't
to
see
make
it- I don't
one comment,
Yes.
Cam.
Yeah.
This is a non-contributing property. And number two, at least according to property records for Delaware County, the township doesn't have a date on this house, and neither does the Radnor Historical Society. But the property records for Delaware County say that this house was built in 1956.
That's believable. You know, all the construction details would confirm that. The last site plan that I had, you know, kind of the atlas, I had in 1937, and the house that's next door, it looked like that was the, you know, that was the main house, and they cut up as you went, I guess, west, northwest, as you went down that way. Then they started carving up. And then I couldn't find any other maps. But the one thing I couldn't remember is if I gave you guys any existing drawings like that. Is that part of the packet? No, let me give that to you. All right, so this is basically a center hall colonial with this massing, and then this side used to be a garage, and then I think they did dormering on top of that. Excuse me. And this owner wants to transform this house. South Wayne, as you know, has larger lots. It's built along a sloping grade, so the roads are curved. The houses are big. They sit up. They have large porches they overlook. A lot of them have the big gable. The smaller North Wayne houses, there's a gabled inn that has a big gable over the front porch. And they have its bigger brother, which has a bigger one. And then South Wayne takes those ideas and puts a little more steroid in them. And so there's a lot of those bigger houses, and they're shingle style, and they're Queen Anne, and they're arts and crafts, and there's a lot of good fabric in there. This is a later addition to the area, and there are a couple of these running around. So what we wanted to do was take this footprint and transform it to respect what really the neighborhood has been showing since the 1800s. So we're basically going to take this second floor and the roof line off of this house and rebuild everything. So the existing footprint is this. The front porch and second floor main gable is here, and then there's a small kind of a family room addition off the back. There's an existing garage. This is St. David's Orchard, and this is a fairly sloping site, as you can see here. Driveway comes back, and there's a little terrace back here. And you can see the building envelope is sort of, you know, you could never do this today, but the rear of the house, This used to be the garage, and then they added this and added a few things, and this is too big and so forth. That is the main house that used to be, I think, the main house on this property, which sits right here, adjacent. And you can see a lot of the big gabling on this. This also has some Tudor detailing on it, and there's a round piece. Across the way, you've got similar detailing that we're talking about, standing seam, shingle. This is a double column detail, really interesting chimneys. And then this is the neighbor on the other side here and down. This is a very similar house, and then this one is a bigger version, and then they go back into the traditional stuff. So I gave you this because it's a little bit easier to see. I mean, I think this picture tells everything as to what it is, and that's what you're going to see. The side is really hard to see anything. So what I provided was a front elevation and a sketch of the rear. And I've updated this as well, which I can hand up if you need it. But I'll talk about it first, I guess. Let me do that. This would be the front elevation, this elevation. And this level here is maintained as a flat wall that steps back and goes into that old garage area. Everything from here up is all new. So the idea was to get, South Wayne, North Wayne, they're porch communities, get back a porch that's, up on the hill overlooking everything, switch out windows for doors so that inside becomes outside, and then get living space above that. And this red line is what's there now, which we're taking down. So we're raising this and making it a little more, it's a steeper roof line, which is different than this. And I'll show you this. You can see the side elevations. You can't really tell until you look at the side as to what's going on here. But this kind of a roof line is inappropriate for this area. And then you've got a really large continuing one, and then some sheds. Nothing's the same. So there's not a lot that we want to respond to in this house. We want to take the toolbox of the neighborhood and say, okay, let's do something that really is going to bring all these things together, and we'll do it in the same footprint, but they need a little space out the back. And the front, porch community, you got to have that. So we did that. And then the rear, all very similar detailing. Some sheds, some porches, some, space up top. And I'll ultimately talk about this a little bit more. So the idea was to get this porch with stone pillars, and this is kind of an arts and craft column. I have an option to do a big round, beefy one, which I think looks better. So I think I've got that to show you. I think that's what we're going to do. And everything else is the same in the main part of the house. This roof line changed a little bit, and then I have a shed coming off of this roof to meet this wall, because this roof line didn't want to do that. It wanted to be steeper and a little higher. And it also wanted to, on the backside, mate with the other roof in the same plane. So let me give you what I have that's different.
Cam, is that fireplace going away, the one that's on the side of the house?
The one on the right side
Yeah, that one.
was an
gonna be
addition that
removed?
was put on to the garage.
Okay,
So that's going away.
okay,
The main one is staying, and then we're adding one.
okay.
So that's what this fireplace is going away. That stays. So we're going to end up raising this flue, and whatever material this is, we're going to do something special from that rise. And it might be a band of flag, it might be some brick pattern, and it might be, but that's kind of like whatever the chimney's made of, and if it's good enough, we're going to respond to that and then make that really interesting. So I have this page with the little change I talked about here that has this column shown, and then also the round column. And then I have this as a hard line, which is fairly the same, but I've got a gable in here. And then I've got the two side elevations just to show the difference. And then there's an overlay of demolition versus, what's there.
Cam, I have to say, I think that this is beautiful. I think it's a great design. Without being able to say that it is taken from one particular style of architecture, I think you have incredibly captured, thank you, captured so many different elements that are found in the neighborhood that really are indicative of the feeling as you're driving around. I think you did a great job on this.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was the idea, is that, this is like a bigger gable than some, but that's what we wanted to do, is to really make that stand out. So the rear, you can see between these two, that changed, that area. Everything else is pretty much the same. There ended up being a shed line in here too. I forgot that this little section pushed out a little bit. But everything else was the same there. The second sheet of this is the side elevations, and you can see how the roof lines are steeper. This is that big gable that comes off. And if you look at the gabled ends and some of those other ones, and you sort of drive past them, you see the big roof, and it's really impressive. But you never see this view, which makes this look like this thing is so big that it's just out of proportion. But it's what those other roofs do. They're just the whole front of the house. So it really is not out of control there. But the idea was to get, we wanted to get away from, this kind of a slope into a steeper slope and have things mate and move back. And the first floor, again, there's either a stucco or a stone base, depending on what we can do. Band board with a water table, 4-inch clapboard, which is either cedar or hardy plank. Then you have another band, and then you go into 8-inch exposure cedar or hardy plank again in a cedar fashion, in a cedar shake look. And the only other thing that's different is that this section, we're taking the second floor and overhanging. You can see there. Second floor pushes out in the front, the side, and the rear, and we end up adding these heavy brackets, the flat brackets that you see occasionally around. So you get a band, but you also get a soffit and a bracket. So what I'd like to do, I think, between these two, is to go with this bigger round column, and I may even get fatter. I think this roof really can take it, and it'll look much better. This is more of an arts and craftsy thing. I've done something similar to that, and it looks better on a smaller scale. If I scale it up, it becomes the thing you look at, and I don't want it to be the thing. I want it to be part of the whole. And I think this does a better job of it. This holds everything up.
I agree, I think, with the round columns. They seem to be more prevalent in the South Wayne Historic District.
So, let's see. Yeah, so this series just shows the round columns. That's the only difference. And then the last one just, some overlay to show you what's being taken away versus what's there. But, the idea that we're taking the second floor and the roof line off pretty much tells we're doing the whole house over. So I think you need to know, need that one for real.
One comment, I agree with what Miles had said. If I was a neighbor, I would be really happy, really happy camper here, considering what's there, because what's there with that house sticks out in its way. And also, just two other comments. There are many steeply pitched gabled front roofs in that area, including the house at 423 St. David's Road, which is on the right. So that was probably the original manor house, I'm assuming, as you were describing it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, in my opinion, the proposed front design is a positive enhancement and contributes to the overall character of the neighborhood.
That was the game plan, so hopefully that'll work. Thank you.
I would like to make the motion to recommend a certificate of appropriateness, and if possible, a certificate of commendation for adding to the visual aesthetic of this district. Thank you very, very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. I don't think that's in there. You can't do that, but thank you. Yeah.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Looks like everyone is in favor of this one.
Good.
I
thank you.
like the fat
I do too.
posts better,
Yeah.
so.
And like I said, we may make them a little fatter. I'm going to go scale it and see what it looks like, but I think at least that. And, not 4 feet, but,
I didn't want to say this prior to the motion and subsequent vote. I'm really hoping with the corner boards that they don't do white. I really hope they keep it in the same tone.
I think they're, the one thing that's really fun about these houses is they have all these different materials and all these ins and outs and ups and downs, but the color schemes can be phenomenal. So there's a whole study that goes on with that. This is black and white, this gets it built, and then once it's going up, the owners, usually the clients can't get their heads around everything right away, and so you sort of wait a little bit, but you start throwing color schemes at it, because that means, to me, when you're painting, you're in. That's you're almost there. So they like that little juice at the end to get you through that period of just pain you go through with a renovation. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Sorry I took so long explaining all that, but sorry.
At this point, do you have any public participation? Anything else you'd like to mention while you're here? You're the only one here. All right, then I would like to announce that the next meeting of the HARB is scheduled for Wednesday, May 1st at 6 o'clock. Applications for that meeting must be submitted on or before April 16th. And at this point, I would like to adjourn the meeting.
Yay.